Hello again, everyone. Chris Mathieu with Forbidden Knowledge News. Join me at the only 7-day, 8-night event that's going to bring you the most extraordinary scientists, researchers, and experiencers ever to come together in one event, the Laughlin UFO Mega Conference. It's February 15th through 22nd in Laughlin, Nevada. There's going to be over 30 amazing presenters. They're going to be disclosing unprecedented truths about our mysterious existence that you won't hear anywhere else. Today, I'm very happy to welcome author and owner of the Book Tree Publishing Company, Paul Tice. Paul, welcome. How are you doing today?
Hey, we're doing really good today, Chris. Thank you for having me on.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I'm looking forward to meeting you in February in Laughlin, and you have a fascinating presentation regarding the one and only Zecharia Sitchin. I'm very much looking forward to that. Before we talk about that, let's get a little bit more information about yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are, your background, and then we'll get into a little bit about what you'll be presenting at the conference.
Oh, okay. Well, again, my name is Paul Tice, and I'm the owner of the Book Tree Publishing Company here. We've worked with a lot of really fascinating people throughout the years, a lot of people who've appeared at, these conferences and things, and I've operated kind of behind the scenes and just getting people well known. And although I've had a really interesting background myself, I grew up as a young kid in what was a UFO hotspot. So as a very young person, I was seeing these things in the skies, and I believe it may be in my bio that the government came out and said these things were nothing but swamp gas and everything else. And as a 10-year-old kid, I just knew that we were being lied to. So it set the stage for a lot of exploration in my life into all these strange things. So I spent a lot of years in the television production industry, and one day they busted our union and offered everybody their jobs back for real cheap. But I had been living in LA, and I met people like Jordan Maxwell and Jack Barringer and a lot of really interesting people that just opened my mind. So I kind of walked out and started doing this kind of thing. And I became very fortunate in meeting Zecharia Sitchin, which evolved into, being here today and presenting some information about him in this upcoming conference.
Very cool. Well, so tell us first, what was Zecharia Sitchin like? Tell us a little bit about your relationship with him.
Well, what had happened was I was at a Whole Life Expo conference in Las Vegas, and it was around 1995. And I was just running a booth and selling books and things, but on the way out, there was a poster on the wall that said that Zecharia Sitchin was taking a group of people on a private tour down into the Yucatan to explore the Mayan ruins. And I was fortunate at that time, as I spent every last penny I had to go on this trip. And it turned out to be the best 10 days of my life. Sitchin he's a very quiet, unassuming kind of person. He's non-confrontational. Any kind of detractors, his concept and his approach towards his research was to basically ignore anybody that's attacking you and just put your head down and continue with your research, because it's nothing other than a distraction. And so he was, I learned a lot from him because he was just such a humble man. And at the same time, he would quietly take you aside and point out interesting things to you, even on like a personal level. So when I got to know him on this kind of personal level on this 10-day trip, he knew that I had done some video camera work and some background in TV production. So he knew that I was just starting a publishing company back in the 1990s. So he called me. He said, "Hey, you want to publish a book for me?" And my mouth dropped open, and I said, "Yeah, absolutely." Because he's, published in 27 different languages, and the guy was just, just amazing. Started a whole movement. And then he asked me, "Would you like to come on all of my trips and run a camera for me?" Because he says, "Before I get too old, I want to be able to document all the stuff that's in my books." Because, in his books, there's just these little line drawings and things like that. And so, he was already, up there in his 70s, and he knew that his time would be limited. So I became his right-hand man and cameraman for him, and I recruited a friend of mine to be the other camera person, Ted St. Rain, who was a huge help as well. And we had gotten involved with a very large foundation that sort of bankrolled the whole thing. So the timing was absolutely perfect. We were able to just travel the world with Sitchin for a few years, and it was, I had never been anywhere before, and it was a blessing. I mean, I am just so fortunate to have been in that position. And so we just want to carry on the information that we were able to get from him, because his purpose, well, you asked me what kind of person he was, and I'm kind of getting into some other things and that sort of thing.
No worries. Go ahead.
Okay. The reason also why he wanted to get these videos done was he wanted to do a long television documentary or a series. So he approached the Discovery Channel and History Channel, and none of these places met his what he wanted. You know, he felt that, he said that he had worked his whole life to get these ideas and his books published and everything. So what he did was, he said, if anybody doesn't meet what I'm wanting for this information, then these tapes will just sit in my my desk drawer at home, and they'll never see the light of day. And unfortunately, that's what ended up happening. So none of these videos ended up getting on the air or anything, but whenever I was videotaping something really amazing, I would, once his tape was out of the camera, because what we had to do was basically, whenever we were finished with the tape, we had to take the tape out of the recorder, label it, and hand it to him immediately. But what I would do is, I was at these important sites, and I would swap tapes out once I had the footage that he wanted, and take video footage of myself. So we've got some really interesting footage, and we're going to be sharing some of it with somebody who's doing a documentary, and we're going to get at least to show people some of this footage that we had taken with Sitchin, and the stuff that we had videotaped. They don't have him in there, but we've got an amazing video record of things that we've been able to see with him. And you know, I was traipsing around with a still camera around my neck and a video camera, and so I took a lot of pictures as well. So I'll be doing a slide presentation at this event, and you know, showing things that still photography, a lot of the things that we were able to see.
Now, Sitchin is, of course, the pioneer, one of the original researchers you think of when you think of the Sumerian mythos and the Anunnaki. But now there are so many researchers that are looking into this, and there are so many different interpretations about the Anunnaki story and the creation stories and the purposes that we were modified. There's a lot of different theories as to, were we really meant to be slaves to mine gold? And, you know, the different reasons for the Anunnaki coming here and genetically modifying us. What are your thoughts on his take on the creation story from the Anunnaki? Do you think it was pretty accurate?
The creation stories were not only interpreted by him, but the original people who translated it, like L.W. King translated the Enuma Elish, and you know, there are other translations that were done by scholars. So it's really interesting, because Sitchin has had a lot of detractors over the years, and especially since he's gone, he can't defend himself. But one thing you cannot take away from him is that these legends and these stories that have been translated by others, they're definitely not going away. They all talk about the gods, they talk about the creation, and so it's just a matter of people, you know, determining for themselves what this creation really meant. And Sitchin interpreted it as a slave race. And you know, what's really interesting is that I publish a lot of different books, and one of the older books that we've gotten talks about the early Babylonian languages. And we worshiped these gods, and the ancient Sumerian word for worship also meant to work for. So, there's a lot of pieces like this that you can put together, and whether or not we were created as a slave race, we really did worship and or work for these higher intelligence beings, because they were beyond what we had in scope. So, when you look at Sitchin's interpretations and the way that he lays it out as far as that being a slave race, there's a lot to that. And there are other people that with different interpretations who can also support the fact that we maybe weren't created directly for the purpose of being slaves. So what a real problem that we have with this whole thing is that the Sumerian language is a long since dead language. And you've got now this dictionary that's come out that people are using, that's saying that Sitchin is wrong here, Sitchin is wrong there. And what's really interesting is that this dictionary was Akkadian, and it came 2,000 years after the Sumerian language. When the Sumerian language was first came out, it was just pictograms. And then the Akkadians flipped it sideways, flipped each symbol sideways, and added other symbols to it. And so sometimes there would be double meanings, just like within the English language as well. So that sometimes you would lose that original meaning there. But so that's why we get these different conflicting reports, because what's interesting is this Akkadian dictionary, there are a number of really interesting references that I've found which show that they're almost completely different languages. I mean, they're using a lot of the same symbols and everything. So you've got these critics pointing out translations that don't match up with Sitchin. Well, obviously, I mean, this is like 2,000-year-old difference between languages, whereby one is merely the original is merely a shadow of how these later editors, came along and changed it. So we've got a problem whereby in the translation it's really putting puzzle pieces together. So it's just a matter of how carefully Sitchin did his work, and it's a matter of context. Now, if you're not going to accept Sitchin's context to begin with, then you're not going to be willing to accept his translations of these. So there could be some bias in there today as well. So we have to give Sitchin a little more credit than a lot of his detractors are giving him with the attacks today.
Do you think that these beings are possibly still out there somewhere and may possibly return one day?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have one of our authors, Neil Freer. Neil Freer was the very first person that Sitchin wrote an introduction to for his book. This was Breaking the God Spell back in 1987. And the great thing about Neil Freer is I've titled my my presentation after his newest book, which is called Ancient Gods and Human Origins. And Neil Freer was he was the one philosopher that said, what does this mean for us today? It's real, fine and everything that we would go back and figure out what went on back then. But all of a sudden, our DNA has basically been jump-started, whereby evolution works very painfully slowly. And all of a sudden, in less than 100 years, we go from the horse and buggy to walking on the moon. So my point is that we've got, well, what was the question again? I'm sorry.
I asked if you believe these beings are still out there and if
Okay.
they're going to return one day.
Okay, and I was trying to work up to that with Neil Freer, because he was such a strong proponent with that idea. His purpose was to create a Sitchin Studies forum, and he was teaching Sitchin Studies class at Metaphysical University online, and there's so much there which shows that there's something out there. And I believe that they really are still watching us. You know, I mean, we're like their children. I mean, our DNA has been jump started. It's like a DNA on steroids. You know, we're just going crazy here on this planet, like with everything moving so quickly. And when you compare that to the pace of normal evolution, I mean, we are just out of control. And what reason is there for that when you compare us to the rest of nature? There's definitely a reason for that. So they were here, they modified us. They've got to be, I think that they left for a while and they realized, okay, we messed with them a little too much here. Let's step back and just see how this plays out, because, you know, we are part and parcel, part of them, and we're evolving towards them. And they figured, well, maybe they can figure it out. Maybe they can evolve to the point where we can become brothers and sisters. But boy, there's a lot of growing pains going on.
There definitely is, but it is encouraging because I do see people accepting more of this reality. They're researching more. They're awakening more to some of the things that no one used to look at 10, 20 years ago. But, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on with the UFO phenomenon, a lot more mentionings in the mainstream. And it seems that people are waking up more and kind of accepting that these things are actually real.
Yeah, and that's a really good thing, because I mean, people's minds are beginning to open, and the current paradigm that we're living in, I mean, if we can't figure this out and realize that we have an incredible amount of you know, potential, and if we're not able to reach this potential of the planet, and we're probably going to destroy ourselves. I mean, look at the environment, look at the weather, look at all the stuff that's going on right now, and yet all of our political motivations are not driven towards preserving things. But it's changing, and we are waking up to the fact that you know, there is no planet B. You know, there is this is it for us, and I don't think that we would be able to get off the planet and colonize Mars or do any other thing in time that would save us unless we really wake up. And I mean, what we've got to consider is we have to either wake up really fast and start doing some things, or a lot of this stuff is going to continue, whereby, I mean, the weather, I mean, look at Australia. These, you know, like how many, like millions of acres have burned. And I mean, that's just one country. I mean, and this is only the beginning until we can figure out that, you know, we have the potential to think in more of a holistic way. And there's a certain part of us within us that is evolving, and it may be godly in nature. And there's a lot of power in that, but most people would rather just come home and crack open a beer and feed the dog and watch primetime TV, you know, and not realize that there's potential within us, that if we decide to go in different directions in our personal lives, rather than just being entertained. I mean, I commend people that are coming out to this conference, because what's really great is that, you know, you have to ask yourself, do I want to sit home and watch primetime TV, or whenever you decide to see a TV show or go somewhere to spend your time? A good question to ask yourself is, do I want to be educated, or do I want to be entertained? And most people would just want to be entertained. They just want bread and circuses. They just want to be titillated. And you accomplish basically nothing for yourself on a personal level by, you know, by just sitting around, you know, eating popcorn and laughing at something, whereby this whole world, I mean, is, a lot of it is still a mystery, and the biggest mystery is within yourself. And if you're not going to want to expand yourself and discover the incredible potential within you, it's just really sad. So I think a lot of people, like you said, are waking up to the fact that there is something within us, whether it's this godly DNA, whether it's some kind of a spiritual evolution deep down that may not have much to do with DNA, or a combination of both. There's something going on, and it's good, but can it all happen in time to really make a a big enough difference for us.
Very well said. And Paul, thank you so much again for stopping by today, and looking forward to meeting you at the conference in February. Can't wait to see you then.
Yeah, thank you again for having me on. This is going to be great to be there, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of old friends there as well, because I've been out of the loop. But we've got some good stuff we're going to share, and I appreciate you having me on to let people know. So thank you.
Not only is there going to be over 30 extraordinary speakers, there's going to be a night sky watch, a film festival, social meal events, experiencer groups, and so much more. And this is also going to be the lowest cost conference of 2020, because the only purpose is to disclose the truths of our mysterious existence. You got to go to Laughlin UFO Mega Conference.com right now to get your discount package prices. You don't want to miss this extraordinary event.